noticed as I was looking at your bulletin and hearing some of the announcements that you were going through the book of Daniel and times of dealing with times of crisis, having God, trusting God, thriving in times of crisis. And I was thinking about one I assume that you just recently studied with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and not bowing down when all the trumpets sounded, and everybody knew that that's when you had to bow down. And you got three guys that stood up, and everybody was plain as day for everybody to see. And the king called them in, and he said, "What's what?" And they said what you looked at, that they were not going to bow down, and that come what may, they knew that God was able to deliver them. And even if he didn't, they still weren't going to bow down. And it ended up in them being thrown into the fire, three of them. You know the story. When the king looked, there were four, walking around like nobody's business. When I was in 8th grade and choosing my confirmation verse, I asked my mom to tell the pastor that the one I wanted for my confirmation verse was the one where Jesus says, "I am with you always. I'm with you always." That's the one that ended up being put on the envelope, on the outside of the envelope there, and it's been a truth that Barb and I have really relied on for all of these years. Jesus said that right after he told his disciples to go everywhere and tell everybody and make disciples, and then he said, "And I am with you always." That is what has helped us too in our own times of crisis, one of which I shared it just briefly about there in the slideshow. We live, I think I said, a quarter mile away. It was a half a mile away. We live half a mile away from church. And 15 yards away from our little spot across the street on the side road is a big house where one Sunday morning, the lady that lived in this big house alone with her husband, they had family in the area, family downtown, but she came out with her walker, and Doña Rebecca walked over with her walker to our little spot and asked me to come with her. And she was very insistent that I come with her. She wanted to show me her house. And it's a huge house. She said, "I think this would be a great place for a church." And so she gave me a tour of the whole house and the huge backyard and the campfire pit that they have in the back corner. And anyway, I said, "Well, Rebecca, there's no question. I mean, this would be a great spot for a church." But I said, "Our church is just so small, so little, and it would be huge." And I didn't want to tell her no because she was very insistent. The reason was because they were going to move out and they wanted to rent to us, and the rent was sky high. She had lowered it, and it was sky high. So we just left it at that. Doña Rebecca and her husband did move out of their house. And unbeknownst to us, a few months after they moved out, there was one of the groups, the drug cartel groups that's in our town, there were more than one at this time, took over the house and the compound. They just took it over. And nobody was going to do anything about it. We didn't even realize they were there. It was kind of under the radar. But that was their headquarters for that whole side of town, and they told people that they were in charge of kind of keeping an eye on everything, and they were going to protect everybody who was under in their area. And that went like it did for a number of months. And then Barb and I took a trip, and when we came back, the first Sunday morning that we came back, all of a sudden we saw on the corner of the street, just 15 yards away from us there, on a post right on the corner, was a camera that was pointed right our direction down the street so that they could see whoever was coming up and have a little bit of advance notice. Well, we have spent, the last number of years kind of trying to figure out how long can we stay here? What if this happens or that happens, that's the trigger for us. We're done. We got to get out of here. We had to come out for about a year and a half back in 2011, I think it was, and for the same reason. So we had in discussion and prayer, Barb and I, with our great missions committee or missions directors, have just kind of had our guidelines. And they've changed over the years somewhat. Our girls aren't with us anymore, and so that made things a little different as well. But we never thought about, we never had a list that said, if the drug cartel that has control of the house that's 15 yards away from your church puts a camera up so that they can watch you all the time and all of the people that come to your church and all of the kids that come to Kids Club, that's a red line. But when we pulled up that morning and got out of the truck, we knew we just crossed a line right then. We went into the church and we had our worship service. And we asked our little group to pray. And so we started to pray. And we just prayed that God would either find us a new place to meet, because we just couldn't be there anymore. That He'd either find us a new place to meet or that He would get rid of the group that was in the house. And we prayed those days, and then on Wednesday, which was our Bible study night, others weren't able to show up, and it was just Fernando and myself. And so we just prayed. Instead of having the Bible study, we just talked, and we just prayed, talked about the situation, and we prayed together, the two of us. And that study ended, and we prayed the same thing. We just prayed that God would provide another place for us to meet, or that He would get rid of the group that was in that house. We finished at 6 o'clock. And I went back to our house half a mile away. At 9:30, Barb and I are in bed, windows are open. Somebody came and threw a grenade over the wall of that house and started a half-hour-long major gun battle. And there was nothing stopping the sound. We've got lots of empty lots between the church and us. And we just sat there and listened and prayed for a half hour while this gun battle was going on. And knowing it was right close to where our church was, and close to a lot of other people that are in our church, some of the people that are in our church. The next morning, I cautiously went to church to investigate and to see what had happened. At the end of all of that half hour, the military came in and kind of cleaned everything up. And that was the end of all of the battle. Shells everywhere, cigarette butts everywhere. And I looked at our neighbor's house. It's entirely full, pockmarked with bullet holes. The windows are all shot out, all of them, and nobody's in the house. I couldn't believe it. God, how was I going to explain it any other way except that God answered our prayer? In 3.5 hours after Fernando and I finished praying, just a couple of days after we started to pray with our little church, and all of a sudden, this group is gone. That's just unheard of. And it stayed gone as well. So by the grace of God, we were able to stay put. And in gratefulness, I asked our Michelangelo, to paint that scene on the outside of our church wall as a picture that Jesus Christ, our King, has and will triumph over evil. that tomb is empty. I thought afterwards about having him paint a serpent with a crushed head right on the outside of that tomb. I think people would have never understood what in the world that was, so we decided not to do that. But that's what happened. That's what happened when Jesus walked out of that, came out of that tomb, and we felt it. We felt it, and it was impactful for our I don't think our little church, the ones that were praying. It's like, that's just amazing. It was just stunning and amazing to us. And so we stayed in that spot. Just a couple of months later then, the mother of one of those girls, the 15 years, we're going to celebrate 15 years, came and asked if we would have that birthday party celebration in the church, because they always have part of it in the church. And then they came and asked for that confirmation class. It's been one of the best classes that I have been able to have with in all of the years that we've been in Jerez. And as I look back and kind of trace God's steps, I stand in amazement and gratefulness for the fact that He has been with us. He was with us, and He has been with us, and with that confidence, we move forward, trusting Him for each step of the way. I was remembering back then to the statue, the golden statue, in Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego. And when they made that declaration, when they stood up there when everybody else was bowing down, and they stood out like sore thumbs there wasn't, that they could see, there wasn't anybody with them. There were three that were standing. And I just their confident faith was just, God throughout the Old Testament was always reminding people of the fact, I am with you. I am with you. And that was the basis for some of the challenging things that He had to do, that He had for His people to do. When they looked at a situation and it seemed like it was so far beyond them, that's the same confidence that we, all of us, move through and into our own situations where we just can't see how in the world we're going to get to the other side, or what the outcome of this is going to be, and we're just overwhelmed. Jesus' promise still stands for every single one of us, wherever in the world we are encountering our own challenging situations, crisis situations, and we don't know, we can't see how it's going to end. I'm with you always. He's been with us always, and He will continue to be with us always. I love it in Spanish, that verse. It says, He aquí yo estoy con ustedes todos los días. I am with you always, every single day. And that's really a wonderful and powerful truth. We're really grateful for the prayers of God's people up here. They have helped us. We live by them. And God's grace has been at work and moving. We're so thankful for the way God's people helped us to go, have helped us to stay, and keep us, sustain us with gifts toward our support and the prayers of God's people. Really grateful to all of you for that. Amen.
Thank you for worshiping with us today. For more information or to contact us, please visit us on the web at mnvalleychurch.org or find us on Facebook at Minnesota Valley Church.